Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last panel of the day. I know you're tired, so we're going to move as quickly as we can. So we've been talking here on this Congo panel that no country has suffered so many millions of dead by war, by disease, by starvation. And as some other speakers have said, that Congo has been called the rape capital of the world. So in this panel, we are going to look not only at the impact of the war, because we've talked about, but also how people organize themselves to resist and to survive. So, and I won't be long. So we will start immediately. First of all, I'm going to give you about 5 to 6 minutes, your point of view, your take on the question. And then after that, we're going to have a discussion among the members of the panel, your responses of or questions. And then the last part, I'm going to give to open the floor. So let's start immediately with Professor Herbert Weiss, who is the Emeritus Professor at CUNY.
Well, first of all, I'm very honored to be invited to this wonderful meeting in honor of a great African author and humanitarian. And I'm also delighted, Mr. Chairman, to be, so to speak, under your guidance, having enjoyed your acerbic, ironic novels many years ago, and planning to reread them now that we've met again. We are here to discuss the impact of the war, or the wars, on the Congolese people. And it would be, I think, improper for me to go into great details. We have Congolese citizens here who have intimate personal experience as to how ordinary people have suffered massively because of these wars. So I'm not going to go into detail on that. I will focus on a rapid chronological development, describing impact and describing moments when the plight of the Congolese people might have been reduced, but were not. First of all, I should say that going way back, the Congolese people, in my opinion, have been among the most humiliated in Africa during colonial times and thereafter. And the reactions of Congolese citizens of all different classes and education levels, I think, reflects very frequently this simple fact. They had a moment of glory during the independence struggle, but that was dashed almost immediately afterwards, and since then it's been downhill. Standard of living has gone down, and what is very relevant, I think, for our discussion is that in the middle 1960s, the country, much of the country, underwent a major revolutionary movement, the so-called Congo Rebellions of the 60s. I think both the leadership and the ordinary people drew a lesson from that. And the lesson was, there is no point in using violence, there is no point in rebelling, because the people who rule us have allies abroad namely the West, who will always intervene to save them. And that lesson was confirmed when the Katanga Tigers invaded the Congo in 1977 and 1978. It is interesting that for most of the period after independence and after the rebellions, it's important to place the beginning date after the rebellions of the 60s, that the Congolese never used violence. They were surrounded by a ring of countries where violence was at different moments nationwide. But in the Congo, there was passivity, and that, of course, helped maintain Mobutu in power. And then came in 1994, the first great impact in the East, which changed the East, and that was the transference of the Hutu government, the Hutu military, and about 1 million people from Rwanda to Eastern Congo. And that changed the balance of power among different ethnic groups in the East and launched a period, 2-year period, in which things were very tight in the Kivus. And that ended, of course, with the invasion of Rwanda, Uganda, and then very shortly, a couple of months later, Angola, frequently forgotten, in 1996. And that was the first war. And the impact on the Congolese people of the first war was not all that serious because it was very fast and it was largely military. And then, since the invaders did not want to be called invaders, they helped to invent a Congolese movement, which did manage to mobilize a lot of people, but militarily, the Mobutu dictatorship did not end because of an internal struggle against it, but rather because of an invasion by effective armies coming in from abroad. So that was the end of the First World War, with Kabila, Laurent Kabila, the father, establishing himself as president in May of 1997. And then the Second War starts when Kabila decides that the Rwandans and the Ugandans are undermining him in various ways, and he kicks them out. And they leave the Kinshasa area, but reinvade from the east. And then there's this momentous event in African history, because the Angolans, who had been the partners of the Ugandans and the Rwandans in the first war, switch sides. And so Kabila is saved, Kinshasa is saved, and you have a relatively long military confrontation. But even that military confrontation, lasting about a year and a half, ends with the Lusaka ceasefire agreement in 1999. And that is what then produced, I'm sorry, they don't have the ability here to tell. This is the map of the Congo. The yellow and orange parts, the so-called rebel areas, and the green part is the part that was controlled by Kabila and the Kinshasa authorities, and the purple parts is the UN observed ceasefire zone. Now, the third war is the one that has produced massive death. I find it important to make a distinction between people who died and people who were killed. And I know that there will be some Congolese friends here who will object to that distinction. Let me just give you one example. You've heard of the statistical study, which in 1999 to 2001 produced initially the figure of 3.5 million dead. Unfortunately, in that study, they also, or rather fortunately, they also checked with their spot checks in different parts of especially Eastern Congo, has anybody in your family been killed? Now here is the extraordinary result of that. Along the ceasefire line in Sankuru, in other words, in an area that was controlled by the RCD Goma, that was where the armies confronted each other but were divided by the ceasefire line, supposedly observed by the UN, by MONUC. For one person killed there, in the Kivus, 95 people were killed. Now, why the difference? Well, the difference is that in the Kivus, there was a civil war within the rebel area, conducted initially by the spontaneous uprising of the Mai Mai, at that time in alliance with the FDLR, and heavily supported by Kinshasa. And the imbalance in this war was that Kinshasa had military power via the Mai Mai and the FDLR in the areas of the rebellion, but the rebels never managed to have a sort of fifth column, if you want to call it that, in the Kinshasa-controlled area. And of course, it was very much in the interest of Kinshasa that this violence in the East continue, because it completely undermined the RCD Goma and the RCD ML, their sworn enemies, supported by the Rwandans and the Ugandans. Now, it seems to me that this reality can be taken forward to 2006. I'm skipping a hell of a lot here, but this is the way this conference is organized. You know, and where we have the whole East voting for Kabila. Now, what are they really doing? The whole East, where the rebels were, voted for Kabila for various reasons, but I think the most dominant one was that they rejected the people who had ruled them during the last 5 to 10 years. But paradoxically, in the Kinshasa-controlled area, just about everybody but Bandundu that voted for Gizenga, an old leader with lots of reputation and a halo around his head, except for that area, in the Kinshasa-controlled area, looking at this map once again, the majorities all voted for Bemba. In other words, the majorities of virtually all Congolese constituencies during the 2006 election voted in the same way against the people who had ruled them recently. I'll stop there.
30 seconds. Okay.
Oh, 30 seconds? Well, then I'd say something else. Well, maybe you give me the 30 seconds later.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Weiss. Okay, and now we're going to hear Ngwarsungu Chiwengo, who's the Department of English at Creighton University, and she's also running an NGO in Congo.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like, first of all, to begin by thanking Professor Achebe. I first read Achebe's Things Fall Apart as a student in Congo DRC at the time when the university was beginning to Africanize itself. But I want to thank him especially, not for things fall apart like everybody today, but for his book, What is Wrong with Nigeria? Because it seems to me that today we spend a lot of time talking about narratives, about power. And in What is Wrong with Nigeria, he had the courage to really look at the roots of the problems to create a third space from which the Igbos and the other Nigerians could speak about the Nigerian crisis. And I think that this is one of the things that this colloquium is attempting to do. Okay, now, when I was told that I would be speaking on the impact of the Congolese crisis on its people, my question really was, first of all, which crisis? Because since my childhood, the Congolese population has somehow been under siege. So when I pondered on this question, the first question that the title raised for me was, when did the Congo ever have the privilege to auto-determine its future? Is the Congolese population solely impacted by the current Rwanda-Congo crisis? Or has the Congolese nation experienced an ongoing crisis? At what point has the welfare of its population been at the center of national and international concerns? Are my childhood and adult memories not replete with United Nations peacekeepers, the disappearance of political figures during the times of Sévéré, Zing-Zongs, Hebus, rigged elections, a botched transition during the Mobutu era, during which Christians and University of Lubumbashi students were massacred, assassinations of intellectuals and families in Kivu during the Liberation War of 1996, the massacre or genocide of Hutus in the Equatorial Forest, and the rape of babies, girls, boys, women, men, and grandmothers since 1998. Indeed, the Congo has been in a crisis, but I have to admit that the major crisis that we have experienced is the one that was inaugurated in 1996 with the advent of AFDL, because it has brought about unprecedented suffering, pain, and trauma that we have never experienced. Now, this was supposedly a Pan-African effort to bring democracy to Congo, and ironically, it was a time when Mobutu was already ailing and about to exit the political scene. And so what was supposed to be a democracy turned into a gory, humiliating travesty of democracy. The looting of minerals, the quest for domination, and the urge to dispossess and ruin the Congo were the objectives of the democratic invasions and not the welfare of the Congolese population. Now, I'm really happy to be here today because I have the ability to tell the Congo. Telling the Congo is not easy, as most newspapermen, also activists here in the United States, have found out. This is a country where 5.4 million people died, and currently we're talking about 6 million, 7 million. We've had more than 200,000 women raped. We're talking today about 400,000. And yet, oftentimes when you talk about the Congo, people say, what was that? I haven't heard about that. And I've wondered for a long time what was the reason. And I've come to the conclusion that it has to do with the framing of the Congo itself. And I think that in our discussion today, all this came out. We have a tendency to look at the Congo from an ethnological grid. And this is one of the reasons why the Congo is perceived as that place that is ungoverned, that space that is not a society, that place that has artificial boundaries. And I keep asking myself, which country has national boundaries? And so I went at noon to look up the definition of society. And according to the definition that I found, it said it was a system of human organization generating distinctive cultural patterns and institutions, and usually providing protection, security, continuity, and national identity for its members. We might not have a sense of protection and security, but certainly we Congolese have a sense of identity. Otherwise, the Congo would have been imploded by now. If the Congo was not imploded, it's simply because most people believing that we were run by ethnicity, did not understand that Mobutu's cane, his tuk, his abacus, the leopard, and Congolese music had turned us all into Congolese. And as we've been talking about framing, the genocidal framing also of the Congo has been a major issue. We have not had a space from which we could talk about the Congo. Because the international community felt guilty about the Rwandan genocide, a lot of things happening in the Congo were silenced. Congolese intellectuals were silenced. They were not allowed to publish certain things or say certain things. They had to eliminate things from the books. Because of genocide, during the Lusaka Accords, we could not say anything either because it was, no, it's a Lusaka Accords and this is how it's going to be. Moreover, because of this genocidal framework, we Congolese were being reconstructed as génocidaires. The Mai-Mais were supposed to be génocidaires and not resistant fighters at the very beginning. And we became xenophobic, people who didn't like the Banyamulenge, who had to be protected. And we are in a country of 250 ethnic groups, not bordered by 9 borders, and yet we're not fighting with all the other 8 borders. We're not killing other people. So how can we be xenophobic only with one group of people? So this kind of identity politics that is based on the privilege of one ethnic group to the detriment of all the other seems to be quite unfair. We have been silenced, as I've said, academically and politically. But we have also been silenced in that we have been asked to erase from our memory our history. Can we erase? And could we ask the United States? Could we ask France? Could we ask Great Britain to erase from their memory the fact that babies have been pounded in mortars, that women have been raped before their sons and daughters, that fathers have been raped in front of their sons? Should we erase from our memory the fact that we have been called Bishusha, the fact that we have been spit on, the fact that we have been taunted, humiliated? Little Rwanda has put big Congo on its knees, and we certainly were on our knees, humiliated, displaced. We were on our knees because even our men were incapable of protecting us. Our men had become also effeminized because we talk about, and we've talked a lot today about women's rape, but we forget to talk about boys' rapes, men's rape. And as a matter of fact, in a patriarchal society like the Congo, the fact that men are being raped and kept as sexual slaves, as bushwives, speaks to the fact that the rape of Congolese women is not a random act. How can it be random? All you have to do is read The War Within a War, read human rights reports, read United Nations reports. When you go to The War Within a War, the victims declare specifically that they have been raped by Tutsis in Interahamwe. We cannot forget that the Congolese army rapes, but should we also forget that the CNDP has also been integrated into the Congolese army, and that the Congolese soldiers themselves claim that the most vicious rapes, where women are shot in their vaginas, where women are mutilated, have been committed by foreign troops. Even Dr. Mukwege himself has noted that 80% of the women who come to his hospital are raped by people who speak a foreign language. It was in 2008 that finally we Congolese women here in the United States became really upset, disgusted with the scene. We felt helpless. We felt that we had American friends, American activists, Insular, and others speaking for us, speaking to us. Congo women in the Congo were speaking to them, but Congolese women were not speaking among themselves. Eastern Congolese women were speaking to the West, but they didn't speak to women in Katanga or Kinshasa. We were disempowered. And so one day somebody said, what do we do? The men no longer exist. What do we do? And the answer was, we're marching in Washington, D.C. And if you would give me the opportunity, and especially since I believe that Congo has been given minimal time, that Rwanda has had a lot of time since this morning, and also the fact that the Congo also, the voice itself has been misrepresented. We've had an official Rwandan voice speaking. The Congo here does not have an official voice. I hope that you will give me the time to finish my presentation. And I would like to show you a video of Congo Kazi and what the women did before I talk about what it is that we intend to do in the future. Is that okay?
How long? Because you have 2 minutes left.
I have 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah. He can show a little bit of it.
Okay, 2 minutes of video.
Just 1 minute.
1 minute.
Since 1996, the Congo has experienced instability and undergone several invasions. The eastern Congolese population has been displaced and massacred, and the bodies of Congolese women have become the sites where the wars are carried out. Using rape as a weapon of war, Congolese women have been massively raped and mutilated. Militias have shot bullets into their vaginas, penetrated them with rifles, branches, and other objects, and mutilated them with razors and knives. Militias have subjected babies as young as 6 months old, girls, mothers, and grandmothers as old as 70 to these heinous acts of violence. These rapes are no random acts, but a will to terrorize, humiliate, and tear the social fabric of the Eastern Congolese societies. A young girl, according to the Human Rights Watch, who preferred to die rather than sleep with her assailants, had her left breast cut off and put into her hand. They cut off her genital labia and showed them to her. She said, "Please kill me." They took a knife and put it to her neck, and then made a long vertical incision down her chest and split her body open. She was crying, but finally she died. She died with her breast in her hand. This girl's torment ended in death, but for other women and girls, the trauma does not cease when they are sexually enslaved. In November 2008, after reading all of these tales of horror, learning that 200,000 more people had been displaced and 40 women per day were being raped, we, women of Congo Kazi, decided it was time our voices were being heard, along with those of Eve Ensler and Lisa Jackson. How could we remain silent when more than 5 million Congolese had died? We had mourned up to this point in silence, so it was time to take a public stance and action. On February 7th, 2009, we marched in Washington to make our voices heard.
Okay, can I conclude?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to show at least just a little bit of the video. But to answer the question about what is the impact of this war on the Congolese, my response is that, first of all, it's emotional. It's psychological. We are people like everybody else, but the international community has shown us that we are less than people. We're not bichucha. We are people. We've had, as a consequence, the fact that we have numerous children who lack education currently. We have a high mortality of children in Eastern Congo. We have family structures that have been destroyed. We have also men who are grappling with psychological problems. We, especially the women, have become victims of mineral exploitations, whereas here in this room we've been lauding those who've been able to develop their countries with the minerals that have been procured with the blood of Congolese women and babies. Just 1 second. The last thing that I would like to say is that with Congolese, one of the things that we have learned is that there have been advantages to this situation. We've been humiliated, but we've learned to be stronger. We have learned also that nationalism is important. We have also learned that petitions to the United Nations and other people are not what are going to solve our problems. What is going to solve problems is for Congolese people to take responsibility for their future. It is for Congolese women to stand up, to take their responsibility, to act, to be educated, and to teach a new generation of Congolese who will one day stand up like all Americans and be able to say that they are one nation under God and indivisible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to ask Micere Mugo, who's a Meredith Professor for Teaching Excellence at Syracuse University.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, let me begin where a lot of people have started today by thanking Professor Chinua Achebe a great deal for creating this space for us to have this discussion. It's a tremendous historical intervention, and Africa will remember this. And I know the Achebe family has been collectively behind this. We thank them. There is a force that is not in the room that I wanted to acknowledge, Professor Dr. Christine Achebe. And I really do want also to thank Brown University and all who have contributed to this very important debate. The chairman told me in private that he was going to give incremental time to the panelists as time went on. So he assured me I would have about half an hour. I have a wicked sense of humor, but I don't know how to contain myself in 6 minutes, but I really hope that I can be given a little more. The other thing that I want to be transparent about is that when we were asked what we wanted to speak about, I immediately said I wanted to speak about rape as a weapon of war, targeting women in general, including girl children, girl toddlers, and old women, elders of the community. Had I known that the topic would be so covered today by so many people, I wouldn't have offered to do this. But since I came all the way from Syracuse to say something about this, I will say something a little about it and just compress my statement here. I want to begin with a statement by the former president of Mozambique, Samora Machel, who once observed that a society is judged by the way it treats its women. The extent to which a society has progressed and to which a society has liberated itself depends on what spaces have been created for women to liberate themselves. If this is a test for Africa, I really do want to concede we have failed miserably. And definitely we have failed in the Congo. But as has been pointed out in this room, this is not a problem specifically unique to the Congo. It's a problem of occupation. It's a problem of demonstration of power. It's a problem of patriarchy going mad and using war in order to demonstrate the extent to which women can be humiliated in order to show conquest of a nation. And this was well articulated this afternoon by the keynote speaker, who has done a tremendous job in addressing this issue. And my sister here, who is my friend from way back, I was going to say old days, and I thought you would know how old I was, but she articulated this very well. So then I just want to mention a number of figures, some of which have been mentioned, but compressing some of the figures I had in order to shock all of us into how serious this problem is. Between October 2002 and February 2003, the UN reported that an average of about 40 women were being raped every day in a small town, Uvira. At around that time, the UN Rescue Commission noted that in North and South Kivu, at least 1,000 women and girl children were being raped every month. It's happening as we speak now. And these cases include elders, as my sister mentioned, some of them 75 years old. There's even one cited 80 years old. And it's now beginning to affect little boys as well. It's a calamity. I want to shock all of us into some action as we look at figures that show that since 1998, at least 200,000 women have been raped in the Congo. I want to shock us by saying that in 1 year alone, and one of the former panelists who spoke before said that 2009, this was just last year, 15,000 women were raped in that eastern part. I want to shock us by saying that just a few weeks ago, in November 9th, women who were trying to escape from being expelled from Angola, 600 of them were raped at the border. And they were locked up, raped time and time again. I want to shock all of us by saying that what is happening in the Congo is not a uniquely Congolese problem, but it has been Congolized. And we need to take action for what has happened in this space. I want to say it's an African problem, it's a regional problem, it's a world problem. The sad thing is, these figures we are hearing are not even really accurate because a lot of times we don't have figures being reported. Those who are in power don't want to look bad, so they don't reveal figures of what has really taken place. And as was said before in the keynote address, some of the worst in perpetrating this crime are the forces, the Congolese forces themselves, the army, as Mwalimu Mazurui was trying to emphasize this army culture, patriarchal culture of using rape as a weapon. I want to shock all of us by saying that victims are actually made to feel afraid and to participate in their silencing because they will be raped again, they will be attacked, or their families will be killed, and therefore the silencing continues. I want to say that even after they go to their community, the silencing continues. They are rejected, those of them who are married by their husbands, those who had boyfriends will never get married. And the same thing is happening to our little children, little girls, and even the little boys. They become untouchables. Nobody wants to associate with them. Those women who have undergone some of these atrocities in the way they have been raped that we were hearing on, even after they receive medical attention, suffer terrible shame because they carry with them a terrible smell that literally marks them as they walk along. And this is what is happening with these women. After they go home, the communities are rejecting them, and they don't want to have anything to do with them. They have been violated. Dr. Mukwege was mentioned, and really he's one of the people we need to celebrate here because this gynecologist has done so much work on these women. And he said, I cannot even imagine how these women get up and walk every day. It's like they have lived with death. They have lived with nightmares all their lives. And you know, some of them see their perpetrators in the villages walking free. Can you imagine what a nightmare and what torture it is to be seeing these people walking around after ripping off productive parts and tearing them so badly that the bladder and the rectum are separated from the vagina? What are we doing? And then I want to go where Professor Christy Achebe went this morning and mentioned that we need to evoke indigenous knowledges and ways of dealing with some of these crises in order to speak with a lot of these women who are from the peasantry. We need to be able to look back and see, in the same way as we have been talking of concepts like Ubuntu, Utu in East Africa, and even concepts like the courts in Rwanda and so on. What can we do in order to let these Congolese sisters and mothers and grandmothers come up with ways of healing, because they are there? And some of these women have started. They've started using orature. They've started using song and dance in order to form communities, to name the unnameable, to defy this notion of silencing, in order to say, look, you may have destroyed us and killed even our reproductive parts, but you cannot kill our soul. And they sing and dance. I want us to go into some of the indigenous forms that looked at herbal healings and ceremonies and rituals, where, like we have in Toni Morrison, communities of women come together in order to try and heal. Where, like in a novel from Jamaica, it begins with tears. We have women performing rituals they understand that are cleansing to them, as people, so that they don't feel dirty and rejected anymore. I'm not saying this will resolve the issue, but I'm saying a little bit of healing, wherever it comes from, especially if it's coming from the communities collectively, need to be explored. In Africa today, in a lot of places, and I know it's true in the Congo, though I have never had the privilege of going there, every third person you meet is a born-again Christian. Religion is occupying spaces, empty spaces that people need to enter with their own knowledge and so on in order to understand where to go and what to do. And I'm not saying if they find comfort in being born again, there is anything wrong with here. But I'm saying that there are empty spaces. And these vacuums we can always begin to address by having these women contribute knowledge in order to recognize that this too is knowledge coming from them. I see that the chair has gone against the promise he gave me secretly, and I just have 2 minutes. So let me try and wind up here by emphasizing the point that my sister here has made. What is happening on this scene is terrible. Women's bodies are now sites on which the war is being waged. Women's bodies have become space for occupation. And this is serious. We need to stop it in the same way as we are trying to stop wars in the world. And Congolese women have started seizing agency and doing something about it. Just this month, again earlier, they marched in order to demonstrate. And these were victims and survivors of rape. They marched to demonstrate against their raping. Let me wind up. I had so much to say that you've been denied the opportunity, but it's okay. Let me just wind up with 2 examples of something that was very touching that was said to me that is relevant to what we are saying. When I started teaching high school, in the 60s, there was a little girl, a young girl who was brilliant in writing essays. I had asked them to write an essay based on the happiest or the saddest experience of their life. And she came to me, she hadn't done the essay, and I was stunned. I said, what happened? This girl had been raped by her father, who had been a victim of the British concentration camps during the Mau Mau Liberation War. So I asked her what happened. And she told me, Mwalimu, the story refused to be written. Then there was another girl when I was doing research in Zimbabwe, and I was trying to understand gendered notions that kids have from an early age. And we were asking boys and girls to say if they were reincarnated and to come back to this world anew, how would they like to come back? And one little girl said, I would like to come back as a boy. And I said, oh, why? And she looked at her toes and said, it is hard to be a girl. So we need to address those structures that Mahmoud was talking about this morning, the systems and the institutions that breed what is happening. We need to break them apart and begin building anew. From the moment our children are born, we have to show there is no preference between a girl child and a boy child. We begin to show there is no impunity, even within a home compound, for the abuse of women. And this will speak a lot to stopping this monstrosity. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, even though you went behind our promise.
All right, I'm going to continue my rule, and I'm going to ask Professor Nkashama Pius Ngandu, Professor of French Language and Literature in the French Department at Louisiana State University.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I want to thank to Professor Achebe because this opportunity is very important for us. I am a writer too, exactly like Emmanuel, and he's a model for any writer in Africa. And I want to thank also Professor Emmanuel Dongala. When we prepared this panel, it was very important for us to say something about the people of Congo. Because many times when you, not we, you are talking about Congo, it is like extraterrestrial. Something, it is on the moon, they killed 2,000 people, they raped 200 women. It is just a number. And you can't imagine the impact on the imagination of these people. Like a writer, when I want to write a novel, I have all the passion, the emotions, the sensibility of all these people, what they are suffering in their body. It is very hard for a writer to say something like romantic, like lyrical, if you know that your people is not lyrical, is not romantic. Many times, Congo, my country, seems like a mythology, a big mythology. And from the beginning, when Mr. Stanley Norton, Stanley, when he went to Africa, it was for Livingstone. But Mr. Livingstone, I presume, was not the real Livingstone. And we know that the mythology of the land of Priest John was very important in Europe because at the sources of the Nile, they were imagining that they can find diamonds, gold, the mines of the King Solomon. This mythology, till today, when they are talking about the Congo, it is only about the mines of King Solomon. But where is the people? And it is very amazing for me when we're talking about the Conference of Berlin, and they say, we can find it in the historical books anywhere, that the free state of Congo, with an army, with a flag, with the money, was a personal propriety of the King Leopold II. But I can't believe it. How I can teach my children, my students, that my country was a personal propriety? It is not possible. It is against my, it is nonsense. But they want me to believe it, and to teach it, and to say it was a personal propriety. We know that it was not personal propriety of the king. It was personal property of the traders, of the multinationals, of and so on, and so on. And when we are reading this book, very famous, The Heart of Darkness, it is about my country. the heart of darkness. How can I understand something about the darkness of a country? Of where is the people of this country? And everything in Congo is like in the heart of darkness. They kill Lumumba. We are the only people in the world who can see someone on the TV and show you the teeth of Lumumba and say, I burned his corpse, I killed him. And this man is free. This man is a hero for his people. And they can say many things. The ghosts of the King Leopold, they cut the arms, the legs, and it is like this. It is not about impunity of the individual impunity. What is amazing for me, it's the international impunity about Congo. It is the first thing, till today, you can see anyone in Congo where I have seen a village, they burned this village, they raped the women, they did this, and it's free. Congo is like behind the scene. It is like a movie. But what I can tell you, it is not a movie. We are fearing really because we know that 60 million of Congo, each one among us, we have a parent, a brother, a sister killed in this fight. We are 60 million of Congo, but you have to know that 60% of the population of Congo, they are not born before 80 or 90. They are young. And these young people, their history is not the history of Lumumba, of Table Ronde. It is the history of suffering, of killings, of raping. We can find them everywhere. I went to South Africa 10 days ago, and the population of Congo, they are furious, and all these young men, these young girls, they are talking about the same history. If you want to know what is the Congolese society, we are the society of suffering. We are the society of hopeless. And I say to my brothers, they are candidates, how can you talk to these young people to say, we can go forward, you can do something for this country? What I want to show you, the people of Congo, actually, we have no logical mind. It is enough. When you have the young people, they have 10 years, 20 years, the only thing they saw in their life is killings, is suffering. You can't explain them, let's do this and this. And to finish, I want to say to my brothers from Rwanda, because the ambassador explained very well at the beginning how they prepared the genocide. But I am afraid, actually, the Rwanda people, the Rwanda army, they are preparing another genocide in Congo. Because it is exactly the same discourse. We are superior. Congolese people, they are just dancing, just music. They have no leadership. And we have, and you see our leaders, they are here. And this discourse, this kind of talking about a people like Congolese people, for me, it is not a myth, it is not a legend. One day, maybe, we'll be the real people we want to do, proud of us and ready to do something with this country. And I think this moment is now. Actually, today, in this room, you and us, the Congolese people, around Professor Achebe, around the writers, around the novels, the African literature, we can dream about a new Africa, and an Africa where every people, every country, we can live in peace, and really in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, we're going to listen to Lisa Shannon. She's a human women's rights activist, and she's the author of 1,000 Sisters.
Thank you so much. Well, like everyone has said, it's just an absolute honor to be here. My fellow panelist, I studied Chinua Achebe in my first year of college. I took a class called Literatures of Colonialism, where we studied that and the Heart of Darkness and compared them, which was an interesting project. It's an honor to be here, although I think I probably have a very different background than almost everyone else who's speaking at this conference, in that my grandest credential starting work for Congo was as an Oprah viewer. So I talk a lot about being an ordinary TV watcher who got involved. But I do have kind of a unique perspective in that I've spent a lot of time in Congo. We've sponsored, at this point, thousands of Congolese women through Run for Congo Women, the organization that I created. And when I was there, I didn't go there as ambassador for an organization or scholar or policy expert, but just as a friend. So when we're talking about the impact of the war on Congolese people, I have had the benefit of talking with a lot of Congolese women and men on the ground about what that's been like for them. To begin, I saw this show on Oprah, and I read an article, a companion piece in her magazine, and one woman was describing an attack where she was being dragged to the forest and begging for her life. And the militia said, well, even if we killed you, what would it matter? You're not human. You're like an animal. Even if we killed you, you wouldn't be missed. And what struck me about that wasn't necessarily that a militia would say something like that, but that in a lot of ways, the international community agrees with that guy. That when millions of people die and no one's talking about it, we are sending a powerful message that we do not consider these people human, worth our time, worth our effort. And so for me, I felt like, even though I had no idea where to start, I just needed to find some simple way to send the opposite message. And that meant connecting with individual Congolese women through Women for Women International. And in fact, I heard this again and again from Congolese people. In letters, women would write to me. They often wrote, they kill us like animals. I would talk with people who would say, when 5.4 million people die and no one's doing anything, we don't feel human. And that is very specific and very personal. Zaverine, one of my sisters, we talk about the difference between people who were killed versus people who died as a result of the conflict. Well, Zaverine was hiding with her family in the bush, and her 5-year-old daughter got sick and died. I talked to so many women, almost all of the women I talked to had had children die, and often it was when they were hiding in the forest from militias. So were those children killed? Well, when you look at the definition of genocide, it includes an item called deprivation of conditions necessary for life. I think a lot of people would argue, even though I'm not going to enter the debate about genocide, not genocide, certainly deprivation of conditions necessary for life has happened on the ground in Congo. Another friend of mine, very dear friend, someone I've spent a lot of time with, had the FDLR come to her home. They demanded money. She and her husband turned over everything they had, which was $120, but they wanted more, so they started beating her husband to get more money. Generos cried out. And as punishment, because she was trying to warn neighbors so they would have time to get away, they shot and killed her husband, and then they took machetes and cut off her leg. There were 6 children present, so they took the leg and cut it into 6 pieces, threw it in the fire, and then commanded that her children eat the leg. Her 9-year-old son, Lucien, refused, and he was killed. So, this is very personal to these people. I have one friend, very dear friend, who is an environmentalist just trying to protect gorillas next to the Kahuzi-Biega Park, who had the former CNDP, now Congolese army, come to his neighborhood, shoot 5 of his neighbors, and shoot his mother just last year. Again, I talked to another woman there, someone served through some of his programs, who had former CNDP, now Congolese army, kill her son. And when she talked with journalists about it, she was spotted talking to a journalist about it, then they came after her. So when I talked to her, she said, she told me she had to hide for 3 weeks. And she just said, look, we have no laws, we have no rights. If you complain about it, then they come after you. They kill our families and we have no one to go to. So it's a complete double bind. I was in far northeast Congo in Dungu for about a month last February. There was an attack a few days before we arrived. The LRA attacked the outside of town and everyone was trying to run away, try to get to the center of town where the UN was, but there was a bridge. The Congolese army actually blocked the bridge so that thousands of people could not just reach the UN compound for safety. Then when the Congolese people protested, apparently it got a little bit heated and some of the people threw some rocks at the UN. The UN threw the rocks back, hitting an elderly woman and a child. So my sense from what it's like on the ground is that Congolese people on the ground feel in just a complete bind. There's no one to go to. No one has their back. So there's this sense of panic and really total desperation. The connection to mines. I visited one mine where I visited, there was a gold mine on one hand, ran into former CNDP at the mine who were there and told us that they go there regularly to collect taxes. Right next door, a location where in one day they had beheaded 29 people. So that's the reality when we talk about conflict minerals, right? I find it very tricky when people talk about Congo as a post-conflict situation. It technically is. There's no question about that. Okay. There's no question about that. And I think it's very important to be precise so that we can look at real solutions. But at the same time, I have questions about how inclusive that sense of security and relative stability actually are. Because when I floated this idea of, well, do you feel like the war is over to hundreds of Congolese women, they just look at me like I'm out of my mind. If it was safe to go home, they would go home, but they can't. Oxfam published a recent report that said rates of rape had gone up post-conflict. Generosa's attack happened post-conflict. In fact, everything I just described happened post-conflict. So it's true that it's not as common, for instance, for militias to come and murder 700 people in one afternoon. But if women aren't secure, are we being inclusive when we talk about what is stability, what is security? I think that's very, very important. But I've really grown to feel that one of the key pieces, at least on our end, needs to be looking at this question of empathy switch, our empathy switch. Because I think in our culture, we are very well trained to talk about these situations out there, refer to them as a heart of darkness. We have all kinds of ideas that everyone has been talking about here in terms of our narrative about Congo, the sort of mythology that exists around Congo. What is society there, or culture there? And I hope that we can explore that in discussion because I think it's extremely relevant. But I will say a couple of things, that something changes when we start to relate to Congolese people like our friends, like our family, which is what we've been able to do. For instance, Zaverine, I wrote about her in my book, and the second time I went back, I asked her a lot more questions about who she had lost, and she told me her little girl who died in the forest was 5 years old, and she loved to help serve dinner to her grandparents. She would take out the plates, loved to help out around the house, and her name was Insemiru, which means I love you. We recently did our very first run for Congo women in the Congo, and we invited Congolese women to come out and basically raise money for other Congolese women. And I didn't know how they were going to react to that. But in fact, none of them hesitated. And Generos came that day. Not only did she show up, but she showed up in a red suit and pink pearls on her one leg with mismatched crutches, and she ran. She ran about a third of a mile, which was as far as she could really make it, because it was painful for her. And one journalist who was there commented they didn't really feel like they could cover her participation because she hadn't finished the 1 mile race. But I felt like she showed up, and she took it as far as she possibly could, and I asked her why she did it. And she said, because if I can run on only one leg, then everyone will know that they can do something to help. So over time, I have just been deeply humbled to get to know Congolese women and men who, in the face of all of this violence, continue to show up every single day with grace and dignity, often risking their own lives, and that in many ways, all any of us need to do is follow them. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.